Everybody, my name is Kevin Hancock. Thanks for joining us today. I'm going to give people about 2 minutes who might be running a little late to go ahead and join up. If you'd like to, during today's session, we're going to be showcasing Exostar's Policy Pro application. If you'd like to follow along as we demonstrate the product, there's a link here in the chat to go ahead and sign up for a free trial. It'll take you about 2 minutes. Should give you just enough time to go ahead there and sign up and follow along as we use the application itself. So for those of you who have just joined us, my name is Kevin Hancock. I'll be the host of today's session. We're going to go ahead and start in 1 minute. Today's session is going to spend a large time in Exostar's Policy Pro application. So if you'd like to follow along with us as we demonstrate the application itself, I just put a link in chat, and you'll also see one there on the YouTube page to go ahead and sign up for a free trial. If you'd like to get started and follow along, that'd be great. We're going to go ahead and start in just about 1 minute. All right, everybody, let's go ahead and get started. So as I mentioned, we do have a large portion of today's session will be a demonstration of Exostar's Policy Pro application. If you'd like to use that application and follow along with us, there is a link to a free trial there in the YouTube description. I've also posted in chat a couple of times as well. If you'd like to follow along, you can go ahead and sign up. It'll take us about 2 minutes, or take us a little longer to get, than 2 minutes to get through the housekeeping and intro, etc. But you'll have plenty of time to do that. So with that said, let me go over some housekeeping details. So today's webinar is scheduled to last 45 minutes to an hour. That includes a question and answer. A large portion of today's event will be answering those questions that were submitted prior to today's event. We got 4 before, but I'll make sure we have time to answer all those. If there is an outage, you can wait for a minute and refresh the page. For your convenience, there is a link in the YouTube description to a glossary of commonly used terms, acronyms, and initializations that will be referenced during today's webinar. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand via the Exostar resource library. That can be found at www.exostar.com/resources. Anytime after the event, you can also use that same YouTube link you received in your email to see the recording of the session if you want to go back and see it. If you'd like to speak with one of our industry experts, if you want to get a copy of this slide deck, or for any other reason, you can reach out to us at cmmc-team@exostar.com, or you can use the live chat feature on any page on our website at www.exostar.com. So with that, let's go ahead and actually dive into the content. So my name is Kevin Hancock. I'm Director of Solutions here at Exostar. And I'm joined today by David Rowe of ISMS Solutions. David, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. Hi, everyone. My name is David Rowe. I'm the Business Development Manager here at ISMS, and happy to show the demo of the platform for you guys today.
Thanks, David. So before we dive into how you can improve your score into the SPRS system using Exostar's Policy Pro, just want to kind of first cover some background so we can kind of level set the group on where we are in the current rulemaking process. And we're still really awaiting that CMMC 2.0 rule. It's still with the DoD. It hasn't yet been sent over to the rulemaking bodies. There are some other things going on, of course, at the same time. There is an opportunity where you can volunteer to get a joint surveillance assessment going with DIBCAC and a C3PAO assessor. You have to volunteer for that, and you have to have a direct contract from the Department of Defense. These aren't really offered for subcontractors. They're offered for people who hold contracts directly from the Department of Defense. That started back in August. There's about 20 companies have gone through that so far. If you'd like to get some additional training or information on CMMC, there is an organization out there called the Cyber Accreditation Body. That organization has a site at the URL you see there, cyberab.org. You can get training there. You can get information, obviously, about it. You can get a list of MSPs that can help you get started. You can also get a list of the C3PA organizations that are ready to do the assessments once CMMC 2.0 does become a rule. Recently there was a new DFARS clause inserted or coming to be inserted into contracts. That's DFARS 252.204-7024. This allows or provides guidance for procurement officers to be able to utilize supplier risk as part of one of those measures that they use in evaluating contracts. So this is that score you enter into the SPRS system, as well as some other information that's provided by the different suppliers. All of that information goes into an overall risk score. And now federal contracting officers can use that score as they evaluate contract awards. So the main reason we've been having some confusion about when CMMC will actually be put into effect is because of the different kinds of outputs, if you will, that will come from the rulemaking body once the CMMC rule is requested, right? There are kind of two designations for that. One of those is an interim final rule. We thought that this is what CMMC would have attached to it kind of last November or prior to November of last year of 2022. We thought once CMMC was going to be submitted, it would come out as an interim final rule. That meant that we were expecting 60 days after that it would start to show up in DFARS clauses. What we're now hearing is that it may come out as a notice of proposed rulemaking. If it has that NPR designation, that's then when the public comment periods would start, and the DoD would then collect all those comments, respond to them, etc. That would be longer than 60 days, right? So in that case, we would look to see CMMC pushed out, past, I don't really have a date, so that's why I'm kind of hemming and hawing here. So I don't know how long that would be. It's kind of however long it takes to collect all the feedback, respond to that feedback, make any changes, and then resubmit. And then it would typically come out as that interim final rule. So that's why you're seeing some confusion right now out there on when CMMC will be initiated, if you will. But with that said, CMMC, is I'm sorry, and this is that the clarification around that revision or that new DFARS clause of 7024, just giving you some additional guidance there on what that is telling the contracting officers and what they can do. So this sorry, this was the point I was trying to make earlier. So just because CMMC 2.0 is not in effect today doesn't mean that you don't have to do anything. It's still the case that if you've got DFARS clauses 7012, 7019, or 7020, that you still are required to adhere to NIST 800-171 if you have controlled unclassified information. If you've got those 7019 clauses, you're required to do that self-assessment and generate the DoD assessment methodology score. That's the DAM score that I've referenced in the title of today's presentation. You take that score and you enter it into the SPR system. That's one of those values that contract officers can use to assess the risk of those that are bidding on federal contracts. And it's also the case that this isn't just a one-time thing that, once you input a score, that's your score. NIST 800-171 is meant to be, to be driven by a system security plan. That system security plan should be continually updated, because if you don't have all 110 controls, you've created POAMs, right? Actions and milestones that you need to implement to close off that particular thing to get compliant. And so as you close out those POAMs, you should then go back, update your SPRS score now that you've implemented those additional controls. All of that is kind of that process you go on a continuous basis. So again, just because CMMC 2 isn't yet in effect, it doesn't stop the need for you to, if you have controlled unclassified information, to be in compliance with 800-171 and to go ahead and do that self-assessment, generate that score, and continually update until you actually close off all these things. So if you're wondering where you kind of fit in the CMMC continuum, or when CMMC 2.0 is put into effect, which of the different levels of CMMC your organization should go for, or what you're going to be required to do, it's really best to look at what your existing requirements are, right? So if you don't have controlled unclassified information, right, then you need to just follow those 17 practices, which are CMMC level 1. Those are those basic controls that you need to have in place to protect federal contract information. If you've got controlled unclassified information, that's when you start to get into level 2. That's when you'll need to be compliant with the 110 controls that are part of NIST 800-171. You'll also need to do that annual self-assessment, and you'll need a triennial assessment from a third party. That's where these C3PA organizations, right, certified third-party assessment organizations, that's when you would engage with one of them to come in and assess you and get your assessment completed by that third party. If you have critical controlled unclassified information, then you would be level 3, right? That includes some additional controls over SB 800-171, and it's a DIPCAC assessment that you'll need to go through, not one from a C3PA up. So this all feeds into today's session about Exostar's Policy Pro, because compliance really starts with those policies. If you're struggling to write some policies, if you need some ideas of how to get started, if you just want to make sure the policies you have in place, meet the requirements, Policy Pro is really that application that can do all those things for you. It allows you to look at policy templates that you can then tailor and fit your organization. because these are just that, they're templates, right? And it tells you what you would need to change, fix, etc., to make this fit your organization, because the overall policies are just that, right? There is not a template for a policy for your organization. It has to be tailored to do or to fit what you do within your organization. You can also take existing policies, use Policy Pro's AI engine to score those policies. It'll use something it calls Kenny's key elements not included. Sorry there, David. Oh, I had it finally. Key elements not included, which goes through those key words that particular policies or those controls are looking for, and make sure you have those in your own policies, right? It can also score those same things on policies you currently have created. This is a SaaS application, so as these regulations change, as controls are changed over time, et cetera, as NIST 800-171 R2 becomes NIST 800-171 R3, the application itself will be updated with those changes, so you can stay current and you can update accordingly. So with that, I will turn it over to David to show you how this all works.
Thanks, Kevin. All right, so Policy Pro was designed to help you and your organization, regardless of where you are in your cybersecurity journey, where you are for your journey towards compliance around NIST 800-171, as well as for CMMC 2.0. And like Kevin said in his broad overview, we have several tools designed to help you through that process. So we'll start off with the Policy Builder. And the Policy Builder, as you can see here on the left-hand side, has been updated for CMMC version 2. So we can see that we've got the 14 different policy families, starting from access control all the way down to system and information integrity, and all of the 110 practices and controls associated with those policy domains. Now, the first time through on the platform, you'll receive this pop-up here, and it's a brief explanation of policies, as well as some of the other documents that Kevin previously mentioned, including a POAM and SSP, if your organization doesn't already have one. We do have some links to those templates as well. However, there's also an additional companion product that goes well with Policy Pro and can help generate those POAMs and SSPs for you. So definitely, Kevin will talk a little bit more about that towards the end, but we'll focus on the demo primarily on policies and procedures today. All right, so we'll start off with an access control policy, and this screen right here is the Prepare, Gather, and Consult page, and this is everything you'll need to prepare prior to even getting started on the templates itself. So the more prepared you are at this stage, the easier it'll be when you actually start creating the policies. For example, it could include things like gathering your organization's documents, records, processes, and procedures related to these various topics, including maintenance, personnel, your company's IT infrastructure. All of those things are going to be helpful as you're prepping for this policy. In addition to that, the consulting portion is everyone you'll want to kind of bring in as part of this process, whether they are internal stakeholders or external stakeholders. For example, it could be your network administrator, head of IT, or CISO. And then if you do utilize any outside contractors, for example, an MSP, MSSP, or an IT consultant, they would be involved in this process as well. Once you have all of that prepared, you'll go to the template itself, and the template is broken out into a couple different sections. We've got the header, which includes your organization name, the department it falls under, the issue dates for when you finalize the policy, approved by, and the tracking number. The tracking number can be used however you wish. Most people use it to keep track of the version number of their policy. So version 1.0, version 2, etc. And then the other sections include the purpose of the policy, the scope, as well as those individual practices that I mentioned. So each practice is going to be broken out into its own section with its own template. So you'll want to go into each policy or into each practice template and make sure you're working on customizing it. So we'll walk through an example or two here. The first one is access control 3.1.1, which is about limiting information system access to authorized users, processes acting on behalf of authorized users or devices. Underneath each of the practices, you'll see some guidelines, and this will help you as you're crafting the narrative around your policies. And so you'll utilize those guidelines in order to customize and create these policy documents. To open up the actual template for the practice, you'll click on the pencil icon located to the right-hand side, and that will bring up the pop-up with the actual template. So for 3.1.1, we'll be talking about our organization's account creation, as well as our work from home and bring your own device policy. A couple notes about working on these policy templates. Like Kevin mentioned, while this covers most of what most organizations need, you'll still want to go in and read thoroughly to make sure it reflects what your organization is currently implemented or what your organization plans on implementing in the future. So based on, again, what your organization needs, you'll want to revise as necessary. In addition to that, there are going to be sections you want to pay particular attention to as you're working through these templates. The first one here in the first paragraph is all account creations will be submitted by the requesting department manager to the IT support email address for completion using the account request ticketing system or other process. So here in the brackets, you'll fill in whatever that system is or whatever that process is that you utilize currently in order to create accounts for your employees. In addition to that, here in the second bullet is another example of where you want to customize, which is the systems administrators and members of the IT support team shall respond and act accordingly to requests within a timely fashion, offering at least a blank hour turnaround for account creation. So whether that's 24 hours or 4 hours, you know, depending on what it is your organization decides to do, that's what you would fill in there. Once you've completed that process, you'll save the changes, and it'll keep a timestamp as well as which user has made that change. That can be valuable if you do have multiple users or employees working on the platform at one time, and ensure that all of the practices have been covered and customized appropriately. Once you finish that process of going through these practices and the other sections as well, you'll come down here into the export and export this document. What it'll do is combine all the sections I mentioned previously, so the header, purpose, scope, and the individual practices into a single access control policy document, and save it as a Word document for my local hard drive. And that'll be an important part for the next kind of feature or function of the platform. Before I move on, though, for anyone listening in who already created policies using our older templates in CMMC version 1 or in 800.171, you can still access your data by going into the legacy sections over here on the left-hand panel. Moving on to the policy assessment piece, this is where you can ensure that you've covered everything you need to cover and that and make sure that there are no gaps within your policy document. So we'll go ahead and upload a policy document together here. We'll attach our access control documents and upload it. So a note about the policy upload is that, one, it doesn't have to be a policy created using our policy building template. If your organization already has an access control policy, you can definitely upload that and receive an assessment of that policy as well. So as I mentioned before, whether you have some, none, or all of your policies, Policy Pro is a tool that can help your organization ensure that your policies are compliant with CMMC 2.0, and then as well as any future updates coming, whether it's around NIST 800-171 with a new revision or CMMC 2.0 with a new revision as well. So the assessment goes over a couple different metrics. To get a detailed view of it, we'll go on to the detailed scorecard here, and that'll bring up this pop-up. So the policy that I've just uploaded, the overall assessment is that it appears relevant in size, scope, and organizational customization. The overall assessment is comprised of 3 different metrics. We've got the relevance, the model similarity, and the word count. The relevance is how many key terms or phrases are included in your policy document. The higher that is, the higher the relevance and therefore overall assessment is going to be. The model similarity is comparing your policy that you've uploaded to our model documents and our best practice documents. And we do that for 2 reasons. One, to ensure that it's been appropriately customized. Again, it's important that your policies reflect what your organization has actually implemented. And then finally, the word count is just ensuring that it's long enough to accurately assess the policy document. So if it's too short, chances are the rest of the assessment is going to be fairly inaccurate as well. So as long as it says it's long enough, that's sufficient for that particular metric of the assessment. The overall score for this policy that I've uploaded is 70.5%. Our scoring doesn't work like how most people think of scores. So in terms of an academic setting where 90% is an A, 80% is a B, our scoring scores you based on relevance. So as long as your score is above a 50%, you have a relevant policy document. And we'll talk a little bit later in the demo when we get to the dashboard about how you can utilize the overall score. So all of these metrics are an important overview of how your policy is done. But in terms of actually improving your policies and seeing exactly where the gaps are, that is through our KENNY, or key elements not included. And we break that out into 2 different types of KENNYs. We've got the control KENNYs and the general policy KENNYs. The control KENNYs are going to be the key terms or phrases that are missing within my policy document, and I should look to revise or include it into my policies. So for example, here, I've got CUI non-public information. For control KENNYs, they are going to be tied to a specific control. And here we are talking about CMMC level 2. And so this control KENNY here is tied to access control 3.1.22. Controlling information posted or processed on publicly accessible information systems. Underneath that, this discussion comes directly from the standard itself. So I'm sure many of you haven't memorized 3.1.22 and exactly what that is. So we provide that language so you don't have to go back and forth from our platform to the standard. The documents for examination are going to be any other sort of document, procedure, policy, any other sort of documentation that your organization might already have created in order to help you address this control KENNY within your policy. So it could be a security plan, it could be a list of users authorized to post publicly accessible content. Again, anything that relates to that particular control KENNY. Certain control KENNYs, for example, FIPS here, are tied to multiple controls. So FIPS is tied to 3.1.13, employing cryptographic mechanisms. as well as 3.1.17, protecting wireless access using authentication and encryption. So in the case where you see a control key tied to multiple controls like this, you're going to want to address it in each control that it's referenced under. Now, the general policy key terms are very similar in the sense that they are also key terms or phrases that are missing in my policy documents, and I should look to include it. However, it's not going to have this expand all, collapse all button with the controls tied to it because they are like the kind of term general policy key, they are not tied to a specific control. So it's more generally related to access control, and it's best practice to include it into your policy. So you should be looking to include both the control keys and the general keys when you're working on revising your policies based on the gaps we found in your assessment. If you do want to work on any of this information offline or share it with others, you can export it into a PDF as well. And then one last kind of feature in policy assessment is this management approval button. So I'll go ahead and click this, and we can talk about it when we move on to the dashboard. So the dashboard is where you'll come to see your progress and journey throughout the platform. So whether it's creating policies using our templates in Policy Builder or uploading policies into Policy Assessment, all of that will be tracked here, in addition to some additional information as well. So we can see exactly all of the different policies we've uploaded, as well as that management approval button. So once a manager has approved of these policy documents and reviewed it, you'll see this green check mark with the management approved, as well as who that person was and when they approved it. That's going to be an important portion of CMMC as part of the requirements as it currently stands, is that senior management has reviewed and approved of your policies. So they should definitely be involved in this process, and you can utilize this management approval feature to keep track of those policies that have been approved, as well as making sure that you're not using any old versions that might exist within your policy. So we can see here in the blue check marks, older versions of the policies that have been approved previously, but now are no longer up to date. In addition to that, you'll see all of those assessment metrics I mentioned before. And as you are working on revising your policies and reducing the number of keys, both general and control keys, you'll see your overall score trending upwards. But again, as long as your policy is above a 50%, you have a relevant document, and the more important numbers to focus on are going to be reducing those general and control keys. In addition to that, you'll see some other statuses, for example, in audit and accountability. I haven't done any work there. However, in awareness and training, I have completed my policy, and the next step will be to assess that policy in policy assessments. If at any time you are confused about whether it's creating policies or revising your policies based on your assessment, you can come here into our reference library and get some additional information on various topics. So for example, let's say one of your keys was related to VPNs or firewalls. You can come here into our reference library, go to the appropriate section, and ensure that you can get the most up-to-date and relevant information based on the NIST standards and requirements. So all of that was done for level 2 today. We do have level 1, so it's easy to switch back and forth between level 1 and level 2. Again, as Kevin mentioned earlier, he kind of covered if you are unsure whether you should be level 1 or level 2 and working on the appropriate sections, you can certainly start at level 1 if you are unsure. And because everything in level 1 is already included in level 2 as well. So definitely don't wait, get started as soon as possible and ensure that you're going to be as well prepared for those third-party assessments as possible. So hopefully this demo was helpful, and if again you don't already have a free trial, go to that link provided in the YouTube description and take a look at the platform. Thanks, Kevin.
you, David. The share again. There. There we go. So just a reminder, as David mentioned, Policy Pro is part of Exostar's CMMC Ready suite. Once you've got your policies completed or you've updated some using Policy Pro, if you want to do a self-assessment to determine where you are today in your CMMC journey, Exostar's certification assistant will walk you through all those 110 controls to create that SSP. It'll generate that damn score as well as allow you to create the POAMs that are associated with that SSP as well. It provides you the opportunity to have that central location where not only your policies are kept, but whether or not you've implemented a particular control, the procedures that you use to enforce that particular policy, as well as the supporting evidence that you've actually implemented it. So all those things can be stored in one location within Certification Assistant, making it that one clearinghouse, if you will, and that checklist of how you're doing against these things. So if one of your areas of needs that you identify in using Certification Assistant is that you need a secure enclave to store and process that controlled unclassified information, Exostar offers our Exostar Managed Microsoft 365 for CMMC. This is targeted at the small and medium-sized businesses of 75 users or less. It provides a managed secure enclave up in Azure GCC High, built on top of Teams with an Exostar application that enforces the controls and the two-factor authentication, user creation, team creation, etc., to provide you that enclave to store and process that controlled and unclassified information that you either may receive or that you may be creating. If you need some assistance along the way, if you need to engage with a third party to possibly provide some additional assistance, Exostar has a number of partners that can do everything from a basic assessment to a readiness assessment to a partner that is a C3PA organization. All of those are part of Exostar's partner community. You can go to Exostar's partner page and engage with one of them through there. Certification Assistant also offers a link to reach out to that community to work with as well. So as we wrap up today, we're not quite done yet. Got some questions and answers to go over, but we do have an exit poll. You'll see that in the YouTube description. Would encourage everybody to please fill that out. It's great to get feedback on how we did today, but also if you want to provide some information of other topics you'd like to hear about, love to get that information as well. So as I mentioned, we received 4 questions when you all signed up for today's session, and I'm going to cover those. So the first one was, what's the next step after self-assessment? So if you haven't already, once you've done the self-assessment, you should go ahead and go into the SPURS system and enter the score that you now have in place. If that score isn't 110, right? So you have some open items, then you should have created some POAMs to go along with that to be those actions and milestones that you need to close off in order to reach that 110 score. So as you work through those POAMs, if some of those are around policies, you should use Policy Pro to help you in writing those policies. You should then, implement those controls that you haven't yet. And as you go through each of those POAMs and close them off, you should be able to go back into SPURS Once CMMC is in place, if you're at level 2, you'll also need to engage with that third party to do an assessment every 3 years of how you're doing in fulfilling your requirements under NIST 800-171. Let's see. So the second question, is there a minimum allowable CMMC score for, I'm assuming they say LM, so I'm assuming that's Lockheed Martin. I don't know. I don't know what Lockheed requirements are on their supply chain. I would encourage you to reach out to your procurement officer and discuss with them if they know of any particular score requirements, et cetera, that are either in place today or will be implemented later on. Before I finish up the questions, just want to say, if you would like to also try Certification Assistant, it also has a free trial available. So you can click on that www.exostar.com/CA free trial to go ahead and sign up for that. Also, Exostar holds a number of these workshops and webinars throughout the month. I would encourage you to have a great session next week with Tim Fawcett and others from Guernsey. Guernsey is one of those C3PAO organizations. We're going to have a session where we're asking you to provide us the questions you want to ask an assessor. So if you sign up for the webinar, you'll be asked to submit your questions, and we'll be asking those of Tim and the Guernsey team, which is one of those C3PAO organizations. So let me continue on with the questions here. So let's see, next one. Is the government offering any funds for supply chain companies to get guidance and implementation controls configured? So the federal government has, they're not offering funds in direct payment to the supply chain, the federal government anyway. But they are sponsoring a number of programs for information and assistance to help both understand CMMC as well as to get additional information. The best known of those is Project Spectrum, which is offered through the Department of Defense. If you go to their website, they've got a number of materials, including training materials, training classes, videos that you can watch for free, and on both about CMMC as well as about controlled unclassified information. They have a number of other resources out there on their website. There are a number of state-run organizations that do offer grants and things like that to help you prepare. Those are typically through, as I mentioned, state-run organizations like the MEPS program that you may have in your state, which is focused on manufacturing industries across the state, and they do have some grants and additional things to help you get ready. Let's see. Last question. When will auditing to the NIST requirements commence? So want to be careful here in the difference between an audit and an assessment. And so currently CMMC isn't yet in place. So those third-party assessments aren't yet required. Now, DIBCAC is the organization for the DoD that conducts audits. Those have been ongoing. As far as I know, since NIST 800-171 was put into place and those DFARS clauses were put into contracts. Those have, once, they are, as I mentioned, the audit organization. And so those audits are, can be done today. You would be notified by DIBCAC that you're going to be audited, and they give you some amount of time to prepare and when to schedule that. So, those are, as I mentioned before, currently ongoing. Now, if what this question really meant was the assessments, right? The third-party assessments that you schedule, those will need to be implemented once CMMC itself is in place, and then it would be an every 3-year assessment process. And it'll then be kind of up to your contract of when that audit has to be done. Does it have to be, completed before contracts are signed? Does it have to be completed within a number of months, et cetera? That should be spelled out in the contract language. But again, it not really in effect until CMMC comes into effect. But just wanted to make sure we're clear in understanding the difference between an assessment and an audit. That was the last question I received. Thanks for joining us today. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule. If you have any questions, you can reach out to us again at cmmc-team@exostar.com. I'd encourage everyone to sign up for that free trial of Policy Pro, and join us on the next webinar. As I mentioned, we have one next week with Tim Fawcett and others from Guernsey to answer any questions you have around the assessments themselves from a C3PA organization. Everyone have a great day. Thanks so much.